The HOA claimed the driveway was too wide, but one forgotten county map proved it wasn't a violation. It was a public road. Every fine they issued filed against land they don't even own. Now the truth is pouring out faster than fresh concrete, and the line they tried to draw just exposed their downfall. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where you're watching from. Share in the comments below. When I first saw the house, it felt like a quiet exhale after years of chaos. I'd spent 2 decades buried in city noise and concrete, chasing paychecks and dodging parking meters. This house, with its wide-open lawn and soft-edged maple trees, looked like the pause I hadn't realized I needed. A corner lot with enough space to breathe, literally and figuratively. The street was a cul-de-sac. Kids rode scooters without helmets. Retired men waved from riding mowers like small-town mayors. Porch flags hung crisp and patriotic. It was a postcard wrapped in HOA-approved mulch. I closed on the house in late spring. Moved in solo, no family, just a dog named Toby, and a garage full of things I'd finally have room to organize. The driveway was what clinched it for me, a broad concrete apron that fanned out wide enough to fit 4 cars without anyone blocking the sidewalk. I'm not a flashy guy, but there was something dignified about pulling into a driveway that didn't feel like a Tetris puzzle. It was clean, sloped just right, and built like someone had actually planned it with a ruler and a little grace. The neighbors seemed nice. Linda from across the street brought over banana bread with chocolate chips, just because. Ted next door offered to help with my gutters. I got invites to a monthly potluck before my second week. There was even a welcome packet from the Homeowners Association on my doorstep. Neatly laminated, stapled, and smelling faintly of toner and mint. That was my first introduction to Connie. Connie was the HOA president, retired HR director. Tall, silver bob, always in pale blue or salmon-colored slacks. She had the smile of someone who could fire you without raising her voice. The welcome packet had her signature on every page, and a post-it note on top. Call me if you need anything. We're so glad you're here. Connie. It was around week 3 when she showed up in person. I was outside, organizing my garage shelves while Toby sunbathed on the lawn. She approached briskly, holding a clipboard like it was part of her anatomy. Hi there, she called out cheerfully. Settling in okay? Doing great, I replied. Loving the neighborhood. Oh, good, she smiled, eyes scanning behind me toward the driveway. It's just so nice to see someone who takes care of their property. She paused. A long, deliberate pause. Then she added, we'll need to talk about that driveway sometime. I laughed, assuming it was a joke. What, too clean? But her smile didn't change. It's a little wide for current guidelines. Nothing urgent. We'll chat later. Enjoy your day. She turned and walked off, clipboard swinging like a gavel. That was the first crack in the picture frame. I went inside, pulled out the folder from closing, and checked the property details. Lot dimensions, property lines, driveway specifications. Everything matched. I even found the original builder's pamphlet. It advertised the wide driveway as a feature for corner lots. I shook it off, probably a misunderstanding. Maybe the guidelines changed after the build. It didn't matter, it was grandfathered in. Right. Days passed, and I noticed her walking past more frequently. Sometimes with another board member. Sometimes with that flippo. Once she was just standing across the street, looking like she was waiting for something to be wrong. But the tone of the neighborhood didn't change yet. Ted still waved. Linda brought over soup. I chalked Connie's comment up to some vague HOA routine. Maybe she just needed to feel in control. I didn't see any reason to rattle the cage. Then came the letter, tucked into my mailbox without a stamp. HOA stationery. First line. Notice of non-compliance, driveway width violation. 4 feet, it said. My driveway exceeded the maximum width allowed for residential properties by 4 feet. The letter cited revised design standards and warned that failure to address the violation within 14 days will result in a $50 daily fine. It included no signature, just the cold logo of the HOA and a return address that led straight back to Connie's living room. I stood there, letter in hand, Toby at my feet, heart beating with that slow, uncomfortable rhythm, the kind you feel when something innocent turns suddenly serious. I didn't know the full shape of the storm yet, but I could feel its pressure building in the air. My dream house hadn't changed, but the way it was being watched, the envelope was thicker this time. I found it resting crooked in the mailbox like it didn't want to be there. HOA letterhead again, sealed with the kind of intensity usually reserved for subpoenas or wedding invitations. My name, block letters. No postage. They had walked it over themselves. Inside, a typed letter in triplicate. Subject: Official Notice of Property Non-Compliance. Violation Code 7-2. Driveway Width Regulation. Exceeding maximum allowable width by 4 feet. In accordance with the recent revision to the association's design standards, Amendment B14, your property has been found in non-compliance due to a driveway that extends beyond the maximum width designated for corner lots. You are hereby instructed to submit plans for correction within 14 calendar days. Failure to comply will result in daily fines of $50 and possible legal action. Respectfully, Connie M. Mayfield, President, Homeowners Association.
No smiley face this time.
Just cold serif font and a digital signature. A copy of the Amendment B14 was stapled behind it. 6 pages of freshly printed policy, complete with a revision date from just 6 weeks ago, after I'd moved in. I read it twice, then a third time, the words warping into legal static. None of it made sense. I'd done my due diligence. Triple-checked the deed, the lot survey, the builder's specs. All of it was clear. The driveway matched the original construction plans filed with the city. No changes had ever been made. I wasn't some rogue concrete cowboy laying slabs under the cover of darkness. Still, the letter was real, and the clock was now ticking. The next day, I visited the building department downtown. A municipal office, smelling faintly of dust, toner, and stale vending machine coffee. I stood in line, forms in hand, waiting for a clerk who looked about 17 and already exhausted. Driveway specs, he repeated, squinting at my parcel number. You're in the Cypress Glen development. Yep. He tapped a few keys, then nodded. Your builder submitted plans back in '98. It was approved with that driveway footprint. No variances. You're grandfathered in unless you expanded it. I haven't touched it, I said. Not a single paving stone. He printed out the original plan set, complete with zoning stamps and approval signatures. Then you're good. Whatever your HOA says, they can't override city records. I walked out feeling a sliver of reassurance. It lasted about 6 hours. That evening, I saw her. Not Connie but Deborah, the neighbor 3 houses down. Retired schoolteacher. Always wore wide-brimmed sun hats and spoke in bullet points. She was standing across the street, holding her phone horizontally, snapping a picture of my driveway like it was a crime scene. I stepped onto the porch. Can I help you with something? She blinked like I'd interrupted a prayer. Just following up for the board. Is that normal? I was asked to observe. It's procedural. She turned and walked away. No smile, no small talk. From that day on, the camera clicks became a soundtrack. The neighborhood started shifting in small but sharp ways. The potluck invite never came that month. Ted stopped waving. Linda's porch light, once always on and warm, stayed off. I caught whispers when I walked Toby. Conversations that once welcomed me now paused mid-sentence as I passed. Each day, a new photo, some from across the street, others from odd angles behind bushes, through picket fences. Always Deborah, always silent, watching, cataloging. One morning, I found a measuring tape stretched across my driveway. Not mine. I tried reasoning. I wrote to Connie. A calm, polite email. Hi Connie, I've reviewed my deed and verified the original builder's plans at City Hall. The driveway is original and compliant with local zoning. Please advise how this aligns with your violation notice. Her reply arrived 2 days later. Thank you for your concern. The board is simply enforcing the updated design guidelines, which now reflect a more uniform standard for aesthetic cohesion and safety. Your cooperation is expected. Expected. Like obedience was the rent I hadn't known I'd signed up to pay. The fine notices began arriving the following week. $50, then $100, then $100, then $100. Daily assessments, retroactive from the date of the original notice. No legal citation, no hearing, just escalating amounts typed out like parking tickets from a phantom meter maid. I left a voicemail on the HOA's compliance hotline. No callback. I sent a certified letter disputing the fine. No response. It was like shouting into wallpaper. I started to doubt myself. Maybe I'd misread something. Maybe I'd missed a clause. That kind of second-guessing is what bureaucracies feed on. Wear you down with their paperwork until you beg for the simplicity of just giving in. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't about the driveway. It was about control, about making an example. And I was beginning to realize I'd become the cautionary tale for a neighborhood that prized conformity above truth. At night, I'd sit by the window with the lights off and watch Deborah make her loop, phone in hand, lens trained on pavement, every snapshot a silent accusation. I'd lived in cities filled with noise and strangers and never once felt this kind of isolation. Here, in a neighborhood wrapped in white fences and good intentions, I felt watched, judged, slowly erased. Absolutely. Here is section. It started with insomnia. I was lying in bed at 3:12 a.m., eyes fixed on the ceiling fan spinning like a lazy compass. My mind circled the same question. How can they find me for something I never changed? The documents, the builder plans, the city approvals, they were all on my side. Yet none of it mattered. Not to Connie, not to the board, not to Deborah and her daily surveillance route. That's when it hit me. Maybe I wasn't asking the right kind of question. It wasn't about whether the driveway was within limits. It was about who claimed the right to measure it in the first place. The next morning, I drove back downtown, this time to the county planning department. It was a dull beige building tucked behind a library, the kind of place you only enter when permits or mistakes demand your attention. Inside, rows of file drawers stretched like silent confessionals. The walls were lined with maps, some glossy and recent, others yellowed and curling at the edges, still clinging to pushpins, like they remembered when this county was mostly dirt roads and hopeful promises. A young staffer at the front desk looked up from her screen. Her badge said Sasha, Junior Planning Analyst. She couldn't have been more than 25, with round glasses and a curiosity that hadn't yet been crushed by bureaucracy. Can I help you? I hope so, I said. I'm trying to figure out who technically owns a strip of pavement in my neighborhood. I've got a property line issue, or maybe not. I just need to see the oldest map you've got of Cypress Glen. Her eyes lit up like I'd just asked for buried treasure. Oh, she said, standing up. You want the legacy layouts? Give me 5 minutes. 10 minutes later, we were in a side room lined with metal cabinets, each drawer labeled by decade. Sasha pulled open one from the bottom and extracted a long, rolled-up document that smelled faintly of glue and history. This, she said, unfurling it on the wide table, is the 1962 Transportation Development Plan for the entire subdivision before it was called Cypress Glen, back when it was still labeled Northwood Parcel D. I leaned in. There it was. My block. My lot. But the details were different. See that? She pointed. Right there. That rectangle running parallel to your property line? That was a planned secondary access road for utility and maintenance vehicles. It was surveyed, dedicated to the county, but never paved because the developer revised the design mid-project. Instead, they poured residential driveways over parts of it, including yours. I blinked. Wait, so that's not technically my driveway? It's complicated, she said, grinning. Part of your driveway sits directly on what was recorded as a public easement, a right-of-way for road use. It's still zoned that way, unless someone officially petitioned the county to abandon it. If that never happened, then technically, it's not HOA property either, I finished. She nodded. Exactly. If it's still public easement, the HOA can't regulate it. They don't own it. That's when something inside me clicked. Softly, but with weight. All the letters, all the fines, Connie's cryptic language about current guidelines. It wasn't about rules. It was about pretending ownership where none existed. Playing sheriff on land that wasn't theirs. Can you print this for me? I asked. She grinned. I already did. Back home, I spread the copy across my kitchen table. The paper was huge, 3 feet wide, glossy, crisp. My lot was there in black and white. with that ghost road etched through it like a secret scar. A dotted line labeled Access ROW, reserved for county use. I pulled up the current county GIS system online. Cross-referenced zoning overlays. The easement wasn't listed as vacated. No updated boundary lines. No filings from the HOA. It was still there, hidden under concrete and assumption. That night, I walked out to the edge of my driveway. Streetlights hummed above. The familiar slab of pavement stretched out before me, just as it always had. But now I didn't see a driveway. I saw a public road they forgot to erase. Over the next 2 days, I deep dived. Sasha emailed me archived meeting notes from the 90s, back when the neighborhood was first forming, and the HOA was just a fledgling collection of signatures and small ambitions. Nowhere in those early documents was there a motion to acquire or absorb the easement into HOA control. In fact, I found minutes from 1999 where a resident questioned whether the board had legal jurisdiction over corner lot driveways built partially on county right-of-way. The response, pending clarification. No clarification ever came. They just moved on. Ignored the boundary. Pretended it was theirs. Until now. Until me. By the third day, I had a file folder 2 inches thick with maps, correspondence, and zoning notations. I had a legal precedent that the HOA had never claimed proper control. I had city engineering logs that referenced shared use easement, never reassigned. I had the receipts. But most of all, I had clarity. This wasn't just about a driveway anymore. It was about a fabricated rule used to manufacture control. They had picked the wrong piece of pavement. And the wrong person to mess with. They thought I'd flinch. When the third violation notice arrived, thicker this time, with legal-style formatting and bold red text, I didn't even open it on the porch. I brought it inside, sat at the kitchen table, and placed it directly next to my growing file folder marked Easement, Public Record. I'd already made the call to the county zoning office 2 days earlier. A woman named Rita, warm voice and quick mind, confirmed it without hesitation. That stretch of concrete was never transferred to the HOA. It remains public right-of-way. On file, on record, not private. Just hearing it from someone inside the system felt like an invisible weight shifting off my chest and onto theirs. But I wanted more than a phone call. I wanted it in writing. So I filed an official inquiry with the City Council's Planning Division, requesting certified documentation verifying the easement's legal status and ownership. I worded it carefully, with references, parcel ID, historical map dates, and a note that my property had become the target of escalating, baseless enforcement by a private entity claiming jurisdiction. It was professional, neutral, but it carried a blade under the surface. The HOA didn't know about that blade. Not yet. They were still swinging wildly, thinking I was unarmed. The next week, a new notice landed. This time, it included phrases like, pursuant to legal counsel, and failure to comply may result in enforcement through civil court. They were escalating. I imagined Connie, in her salmon-colored slacks, tapping out the letter with a stern expression and far too much certainty. The board was doubling down, as if noise and formality could drown out facts. I didn't reply. I didn't argue. I waited. The neighborhood was shifting too. Not in dramatic ways, no torches and pitchforks, but in the small, chilly gestures that creep into your daily routine. I'd wave at Linda. She looked down at her begonias. Ted mumbled something when I passed him at the mailbox. Something about how rules are rules. The mailbox, once home to coupons and dog walker flyers, now carried cold notices and silence. I became that guy. Connie made sure of it. She began attending her morning walks with a second board member in tow, Marjorie, I think, clipboard in hand, murmuring in low tones, eyes constantly darting to my driveway. At one point, I caught her talking to a couple walking their dog. I only heard one sentence as I walked by. It's not about the driveway anymore. It's about respecting community standards. I said nothing. Just kept walking Toby. Because I knew something she didn't. 3 days later, I received the letter I'd been waiting for. A thick manila envelope stamped with the City of Fairgrove seal. Inside, a signed statement from the city planning director, copies of the original transportation development plan, and a zoning verification form with one bold sentence underlined. The paved section in question remains under the designation of public right-of-way and is not subject to private governance by any homeowners association or private body. There it was, in ink, on letterhead. The ground beneath my feet and theirs had just shifted. Still, I said nothing. Not yet. Let them dig the hole a little deeper. That week, I mowed the lawn, cleaned the garage, and went about my routines as if nothing had changed. But now, every movement felt different, steadier, like walking through a storm with a raincoat no one knew I had. The fines kept coming. The tone got nastier. One email accused me of deliberate community sabotage and warned that I was on track for formal legal arbitration. Deborah passed by my house daily, camera still in hand, but her steps were quicker now, less triumphant, like she could feel the winds changing, but didn't know where they were blowing. A week later, I got a surprise knock on the door. It was a man in a short-sleeved collared shirt, clipboard in hand, city vehicle parked out front. "Mr. Langley?" "That's me. I'm Greg with Fairgrove Public Infrastructure. We received a copy of your easement inquiry, just doing a routine field check to confirm boundaries." I led him to the driveway. He measured, photographed, took note. "You're good," he said. "This stretch is technically still ours. Should have been abandoned to private ownership decades ago. But no one filed the paperwork." He paused. "HOAs do this sometimes. Think they own everything between the fences. Most folks don't question it. I guess I'm not most folks." He smiled. "That's probably why you're still standing." Later that evening, I stood at the edge of the driveway, drink in hand, watching the amber light spill over the quiet street. I looked down at the concrete, same as it ever was, but now I saw something else. Authority, not because I claimed it, but because I verified it. Piece by piece, law by law. They had threatened, fined, whispered, and weaponized structure against me. And I had answered them with silence, patience, and documents older than their rulebooks. The shift wasn't loud. It didn't come with a gavel. But it was happening. And soon, they'd feel it. If they were going to accuse me of turning my driveway into a public road, I figured, why not embrace it? After all, the county said it was one. Legally, it belonged to the public, never to the HOA. So I decided to treat it with the reverence and irony it deserved. The first edition was a public bench, bought secondhand from a city salvage auction, powder-coated steel, slight dent in the backrest, still had donated by Rotary Club Gen 1 and AT2 etched on the side. I bolted it down right at the edge of the driveway, facing east, like a tiny transit stop for no one in particular. Next came the little free library, hand-built from leftover cedar planks in my garage. I filled it with classics and paperbacks, Steinbeck, Grisham, a few volumes of Calvin and Hobbes for balance. A laminated sign read, "This public easement supports public literacy." I added reflective road markers along the edge. Cheap ones, the kind used on county backroads. They clicked softly when cars turned in at night, casting little diamonds of light. I even spray-painted a tiny yellow line across the middle of the concrete. Subtle, but just enough to imply through traffic. By the end of the weekend, my driveway looked less like a suburban parking space, and more like the entrance to a forgotten pocket park. Neighbors noticed. At first, just confused glances. Then slower walks. Then lingering. A kid from down the street, Marcus, I think, started using it as his skate zone. Just carving slow turns under the streetlight while his mom stood nearby with folded arms and a hesitant smile. An elderly couple I'd only seen from a distance started sitting on the bench in the evening. She read, "He just watched the sunset." No one said much, but they came. And just like that, my driveway wasn't a violation anymore. It was a village green with curb appeal. The HOA, of course, hated it. On Monday, I received a cease and desist email, citing unauthorized street signage, installation of unapproved structures, and my favorite line, improper repurposing of private property to simulate municipal infrastructure. I printed it out, framed it, and hung it in the little free library. On Tuesday, a second email arrived, this time threatening to involve the Community Standards legal team. Still no mention of the county's ruling. Still no mention of the easement status. Just more bluster. I didn't reply, but I did repaint the yellow line, thicker this time. The irony, of course, was that the HOA had forced this transformation. I hadn't asked for a public zone. I hadn't planned on markers, benches, or laminated legal sarcasm. But they insisted on defining the space on their terms. So I gave it back to them exactly as they feared, but entirely within my rights. They tried to control 4 feet of concrete. Instead, they created the most charming non-road in town. And the community quietly, subtly was starting to prefer it that way. The envelope was heavy, not in weight, but in finality. Stamped with the City of Fairgrove seal. It arrived by certified mail, signature required. I opened it at the kitchen counter, same place where the first violation notice had landed weeks earlier. This one, however, read very differently. Final determination of parcel boundary and easement status, case. Upon review of historical subdivision records, transportation development plans, 1962-1998, and current zoning overlays, the City of Fairgrove confirms that the paved section in question is a public right-of-way easement retained under county jurisdiction. At no point has ownership of the easement been transferred, assigned, or relinquished to Cypress Glen Homeowners Association or any private entity. Signed, Brenda J. McKellar, Director of Planning. There it was. In writing. On letterhead. The truth, notarized. I tucked it neatly into my growing binder, just behind the framed cease and desist email, and labeled the tab in red ink. Final kill shot. But it didn't stop there. Because once you start digging, you realize you're not just uncovering lies. You're stepping over the bones they buried and hoped no one would find. In this case, those bones looked a lot like event flyers. Back in July, I remembered. The HOA had hosted a community summer fair with food trucks and a live band set up right on the walking trail across from the retention pond. That trail, according to county zoning maps, also sat on a public utility easement. I did some checking. No permits had been pulled, no notification to the city. Another event, the Harvest Block Jam, was hosted on the green strip beside the tennis courts, also public access land. In other words, the HOA had been illegally using public easements for years. No one questioned it, because no one thought to ask. Until now, I reached out to a property rights attorney I'd worked with years ago, sharp, quiet, and allergic to drama. Exactly what I needed. I don't want a lawsuit, I told him, just the truth. Documented. He nodded once. Then we'll start with a FOIA request. Within a week, we filed a Freedom of Information Act inquiry targeting all Cypress Glen HOA board emails, meeting minutes, and communications over the last 18 months related to easements, property boundaries, and specifically my address. 30 days later, the results came in. Buried on page 42 of the email dump was the one that confirmed everything. An internal message from Connie to another board member, dated 2 months before my first violation letter. Yes, the easement technically belongs to the county, but unless Langley does his homework, we can proceed under our design rules. No one's pushed back before. And there it was. Not confusion. Not ignorance. Not miscommunication. Intent. They knew. They moved forward anyway. They hoped I'd fold, pay the fines, trim the driveway, and stay quiet. Instead, I'd stayed still. And now, with a binder full of zoning rulings, public easement protections, internal emails, and proof of HOA misuse of land, they were the ones standing on thin pavement. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I didn't even send a warning letter. Instead, I set a new laminated notice inside the little free library on the edge of my not driveway. This easement is protected by County Zoning Code 7. Unauthorized claims of jurisdiction are subject to municipal review. A second sign. Smaller. Red. Please enjoy this public space responsibly. Complaints may be directed to City Hall. People stopped to read it. Some nodded. One woman whispered, "Good for you." The HOA had claimed power through assumption. Now they were about to face reality. Public, documented, and irreversible. Justice doesn't always arrive with a bang. Sometimes, it slides quietly into your mailbox and rewrites the story. The HOA meetings were usually sparsely attended. They were held every second Thursday in the back of the community center, in a room that smelled like lemon cleaner and bad coffee. Most people only showed up when their fence stain color got rejected or someone's dog barked past bedtime. But this time, the chairs were full. I arrived 10 minutes early. binder tucked under my arm, copies neatly stacked. Connie was already seated at the head of the table, posture perfect. Her fingers steepled as if she were preparing to defuse a bomb instead of preside over a neighborhood chat. She didn't acknowledge me. That was fine. I didn't need her permission to speak. The meeting followed the usual rhythms: committee updates, budget reviews, an awkward joke about sprinkler timers. But when they opened the floor to resident concerns, I stood without fanfare. "Hi," I said. "David Langley, 114 Pinecrest. I'd like to submit a document to the board and to the community." Connie tensed. I handed the first few copies to the board, then began passing stacks down each row. A low rustle filled the room as pages changed hands. Some residents scanned, others just stared at the official city seal on the top of the first page. I cleared my throat. "This is a certified letter from the City of Fairgrove's Planning Department, confirming that the section of pavement in front of my home, what the HOA has labeled a violation for being too wide, is, in fact, a public right-of-way easement. It has never been transferred to the HOA. It is not under their control. It is not subject to their design guidelines." Gasps. A few murmurs. One man whispered, "Are you serious?" "That alone would be enough," I continued. "But there's more." I opened the binder and withdrew the FOIA printout. "This is an email from your president, Connie Mayfield, dated June 5th, 2 months before I received my first violation notice. In it, she acknowledges that the easement does not belong to the HOA, but recommends moving forward with enforcement anyway, assuming I wouldn't dig deep enough to find the truth." I turned the page. Here's another one from July, referring to me as a test case to discourage non-conforming aesthetics. A man in the front row turned to his wife. "They're trying to control how people's homes look, even if it's not theirs." I kept my voice steady. "This isn't about a driveway. This is about manipulation. It's about using assumed authority to intimidate homeowners into submission." Connie interjected, voice tight, cracking at the edges. "Mr. Langley, you're out of line." I turned to her. Calm, cold. "Then by all means clarify. Do you deny that you wrote this email?" Silence. Someone coughed. I nodded. "Didn't think so." In the back, Deborah stood abruptly, eyes scanning the page in her lap. "Wait," she said. Voice thin. "Does that mean my sidewalk? That's a utility easement too, isn't it?" A ripple moved through the room. Heads turned. Thoughts sparked. Another man, he had a landscaping van always parked 2 houses down, raised a hand. "What about when the HOA made me tear up that stone path? That was on a county easement too." The room began to buzz, low and rising. Connie looked pale. A woman near the snacks table said softly, "How many people did they do this to?" I answered for her. "More than just me. I pulled 5 easements in this neighborhood that remain under city or county control. The HOA has been enforcing private design codes on public land for years, without legal right, without disclosure, and without care." The momentum shifted tangibly. You could feel it, an invisible seesaw tipping hard in my favor. Connie, once the room's unchallenged voice, was now just one more person with a folder full of contradictions. Her eyes darted around, looking for support. None came. "We need a vote," someone called out. "An independent audit. All the easements. All the enforcement actions. And a motion to remove the board members involved," said another. "If they lied to us intentionally, that's grounds." Connie stood, face tight. "This isn't how we do things." "No," I said softly. "But it's how we should have done them a long time ago." I left the meeting before the shouting started. As I stepped into the cool night air, I heard someone call my name. It was Ted, the same neighbor who'd stopped waving weeks ago. He looked sheepish now, a little tired. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have asked questions sooner." I smiled. Better late than never. And I walked home past the yellow line, the bench, the little free library glowing under the porch light. This was never just about concrete. It was about truth. And tonight it finally had the room. By the following week, the community center's folding chairs were arranged in tighter rows. This time, the air buzzed before the meeting even started. Residents in clusters, whispering with printouts in hand. Some brought their violation letters. Others brought their phones, ready to record. The HOA's confidence was cracked, and everyone wanted to see what would come spilling out. Connie entered just after 6 hours, flanked by Marjorie and Ed from the board. She wore her usual powder blue blouse, and that clipped smile, an expression that might have once projected leadership, but now just looked like a defense mechanism. Eyes followed her all the way to her seat. The room didn't wait. "Are we going to talk about the emails?" Someone called out before the meeting was officially gelled in. Another voice. "And the city's letter? And the public easement land you've been fining people for?" Connie raised her hands, palms out, attempting calm. "Let's be civil. There's been some miscommunication, obviously. The board acted on the best information we had at the time." I watched quietly from the back, binder unopened. My part was done. This was hers to answer for now. She cleared her throat. The documents in question were reviewed internally. The maps from the 60s and 90s are difficult to interpret. We misunderstood the easement boundary lines. That's all. Someone 3 rows up laughed bitterly. "You misunderstood the maps. You wrote, 'Let's proceed unless he does his homework.' That's not a misreading, that's a lie." Connie blinked. "That email was taken out of context." Marjorie leaned into the mic. "We all approved the violation letter based on Connie's resemblance. We assumed she verified it." Now it was Connie's turn to flinch. "We were following historical precedent," she snapped. "Besides, most residents complied without issue. No one objected before." "That doesn't make it right," Linda interrupted from the second row, voice trembling but clear. "It means people were scared to speak up. You punished us for trusting you." Ted stood slowly, motioned to remove Connie Mayfield as board president, effective immediately. Seconded, thirded, the vote was called without hesitation. Hands went up, almost every hand in the room. Connie stood frozen, lips slightly parted, as if she expected a different outcome, as if certainty would save her one last time. But it didn't. The next motion was procedural but carried weight. An invitation to the city planning office to walk the entire neighborhood, reviewing every boundary, easement, and contested claim the HOA had ever asserted. There would be no more assumptions. No more half-truths stapled to mailboxes. The walls of quiet compliance were collapsing. Brick by brick, people started asking questions they should have asked years ago. Was my mailbox placement actually a violation? Why did we have to remove solar lights when they weren't on HOA land? Where did all those fines go? The spell was broken. The language of control, non-compliance, uniformity, design integrity no longer carried the same weight. Now it just sounded like fear in a cardigan. As the meeting ended, residents didn't rush out like they used to. They lingered, talked, shared stories, compared notes. And Connie? She left alone, clipboard clutched against her chest, eyes straight ahead. No thank you. No farewell. Just one last silent walk past the very public road she once thought she ruled. No gavel had fallen, no judge had spoken. But justice? It had arrived anyway. The driveway hasn't changed a bit. Same slope, same clean edge, same quiet stretch of concrete fanning out like a welcome mat to nowhere. But everything around it feels different now. The reflective markers still line each side, catching the afternoon sun just so. At night, they glow faintly like runway lights, a subtle reminder of the path carved not just through asphalt, but through assumption, control, and silence. What was once a violation is now a boundary line of truth. And oddly enough, a bit of a landmark. In the weeks that followed Connie's removal, the HOA board underwent a full audit, not just of finances, but of structure, behavior, and boundaries, literal and otherwise. For the first time, residents were invited to join an oversight committee with access to meeting minutes, review authority over violations, and input on future changes to design standards. The fines stopped. The notices grew fewer, and when they came, they included documentation, proof, a conversation. The HOA hadn't vanished. It had evolved, because now, it was being watched too. I never joined the board. Despite a few persistent invitations, I politely declined. I wasn't interested in policy. I was interested in clarity. Instead, I installed a new sign at the edge of the driveway mounted on a short cedar post, hand-sanded and sealed against the weather. Black letters engraved and painted with care. Public easement, protected by records. Below that, in smaller print, established 1962, reaffirmed 2020. Neighbors paused to read it. Some smiled. One man nodded slowly, like he was translating it in real time. This space is not yours to control. It never was. The little free library is still there too. Toby likes to lie beside it in the mornings, just under the bench where the older couple now sit most Saturdays. Kids come by on their bikes, trade out comic books and mystery paperbacks. Someone even left a copy of Robert's Rules of Order in the non-fiction shelf with a sticky note that said, "Light reading for HOA presidents." I didn't touch it. Felt like a tribute. The chalk drawings started not long after. A few kids from down the block, led by Marcus with the skateboard, began using the driveway as their own creative canvas. Roads, roundabouts, little parking spaces marked with squiggly boxes and labels like Mom Van and Ice Cream Truck. One weekend, they built an entire city in pastels, complete with fire station, pizza parlor, and a mayor's house at the top of the driveway. "Who's the mayor?" I asked, leaning on a rake. "You are," Marcus said, without looking up. "Seems like a lot of responsibility," I said. He shrugged. "You already fixed the roads." I think about that a lot. How something as small as 4 feet of concrete became the stage for a fight no one saw coming. How a space meant for tires and oil stains turned into a symbol for autonomy, for facts, for standing one's ground without ever raising your voice. It wasn't about winning. It was about not yielding to fiction. About knowing what was mine, what wasn't, and what no one had the right to take, even if they dressed it up in bylaws and polite language. Now, when I sip coffee on the porch and watch chalk cities rise and fall with the rain, I don't feel angry. I feel proud. The HOA still holds its meetings. They're shorter now, friendlier, sometimes even funny. New voices have emerged. People ask questions. There's a sense of mutual care, not just control. In my driveway, it just sits there, as it always has. Only now, it's not just concrete. It's the most powerful 4 feet in town. Funny what truth can pave. Think your HOA knows the rules? Wait until you see what happens when you read the fine print. We're not just telling stories, we're exposing blueprints. Because every cul-de-sac has secrets, and every sidewalk war leaves a paper trail. Stick around, the next battle might look a lot like your own.